In a dramatic escalation of economic tensions, President Donald Trump's administration has recently implemented sweeping tariffs, igniting a fierce backlash from both international and domestic stakeholders. The tariffs, which have already caused significant market upheaval, have prompted a wave of criticism from lawmakers and allies alike as concerns mount over their potential long-term impacts on the global economy. As U.S. markets began to recover from the initial shock of the tariffs, which saw a significant drop in stock values, the situation remains precarious. On April 7, 2025, the markets opened higher, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average up by 2.37% and the S&P 500 by 2.36%. This rebound came after President Trump announced tariffs that could reach as high as 104% on Chinese imports if retaliatory measures are not withdrawn. In a bold statement, China's Commerce Ministry declared its readiness to fight to the end, signaling a commitment to retaliate against U.S. economic aggression. The political ramifications of these tariffs are already being felt domestically. In a Senate Finance Committee hearing, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer faced intense scrutiny over the administration's tariff strategy. Senators from both parties, including Democrats like Elizabeth Warren, have voiced their concerns. Warren emphasized that Congress has the power to reverse these tariffs, urging immediate action. Senator Ron Wyden went so far as to describe the administration's approach as lacking a coherent strategy, stating, "I don't see any strategy at all." The administration's justification for the tariffs hinges on a desire to correct what it describes as unfair trade practices and to address a ballooning trade deficit. Greer posited that the tariffs are a means to compel trading partners to engage in negotiations aimed at achieving reciprocity. However, the immediate consequences have been stark, with short sellers profiting by approximately $127 billion since the tariffs were announced as investors reacted to the market turbulence caused by the new policies. Internationally, the response has been equally robust. European markets, which initially suffered losses, have started to recover as they reassessed their positions in light of the evolving trade landscape. Reports indicate that the European Union is prepared to discuss purchasing more liquefied natural gas from the U.S. in an effort to bolster ties amidst the tariff tensions. Meanwhile, leaders from countries like Italy are set to engage in discussions with the Trump administration to address the tariffs' implications on their economies. In addition to the economic fallout, the political landscape is shifting. Trump's tariffs have ignited debates within the Republican Party, with some members expressing concern about the potential for widespread economic damage. Senator Rand Paul articulated his fears, stating that the tariffs could decimate personal retirement savings, highlighting a growing apprehension among lawmakers about the tariffs' implications for constituents. As the situation develops, it is clear that the conflict over tariffs is more than an economic issue. It is a complex geopolitical struggle with ramifications that could reshape international trade relationships. With Trump refusing to consider pausing the tariffs, stating, "I don't mind going through it because I see a beautiful picture at the end," all eyes will be on how global markets react in the coming days and how international partners respond to the escalating trade war. The landscape remains fluid, and as negotiations unfold, the potential for a resolution seems far from certain. The administration's aggressive stance, coupled with the fierce pushback from both domestic and international fronts, suggests that the coming weeks will be critical in determining the trajectory of U.S. trade policy and its broader implications for global economic stability. In a fresh escalation of tensions between the United States and China, President Donald Trump has threatened to impose an additional 50% tariff on Chinese imports, a move that has sent shockwaves through global markets already reeling from recent trade uncertainties. This threat comes on the heels of China's own retaliatory tariffs, which were announced in response to Trump's earlier tariffs, leading to fears of a spiraling trade war that could have dire implications for the global economy. During a press event in the Oval Office, Trump stated unequivocally, "We're not looking at that," when asked if he would consider pausing his tariff plans, emphasizing that foreign leaders were eager to negotiate new trade deals. His firm stance is particularly alarming given the recent volatility in U.S. stock markets, which have experienced significant declines on fears of an impending recession. On Monday alone, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by 0.9%, reflecting the broader anxiety among investors regarding the potential impacts of escalating tariffs. The president's threats were articulated in a post on Truth Social, where he outlined that if China did not retract its recent 34% tariff increase by April 8, the U.S. would move forward with its own 50% tariff. Additionally, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated, he declared, indicating a hardening of U.S. trade policy. Analysts suggest that if realized, these tariffs would bring the total U.S. tariff rate on Chinese goods to an unprecedented 104%. This situation has not only raised eyebrows in Washington but has also sparked outrage in Beijing, where officials have characterized Trump's threats as blackmail and vowed to fight to the end against what they perceive as aggressive economic bullying. The Chinese Commerce Ministry issued a statement declaring that such escalations by the U.S. are a mistake on top of a mistake, further complicating the prospects of reaching a diplomatic resolution. Market analysts are keenly observing the ripple effects of these tariff announcements. The global equity markets have been volatile, and significant losses were recorded over the preceding days as investors grappled with the uncertainty introduced by the tariff policies. A notable feature of this economic landscape is the increasing concern among Trump's allies regarding the potential repercussions of his tariff strategy. Prominent figures like Senator John Kennedy have expressed unease, stating, "We don't know if the medicine will be worse than the disease," highlighting a growing divide within the Republican Party regarding the administration's approach. Despite the economic turmoil, Trump remains resolute, asserting that the tariffs are essential for restoring American manufacturing jobs and recalibrating trade relationships. He has argued that short-term economic pain is a necessary sacrifice for long-term gains, claiming, "I don't mind going through it because I see a beautiful picture at the end." However, some economic experts caution that such a strategy could exacerbate inflation and stall economic recovery efforts. The Federal Reserve, led by Chair Jerome Powell, has warned that these tariffs could contribute to rising inflationary pressures, suggesting that there is considerable uncertainty about the immediate and long-term effects of Trump's tariff policies. Meanwhile, the European Union has begun to signal its readiness to respond with countermeasures as tensions between the U.S. and its allies also simmer beneath the surface. As the situation unfolds, it is clear that the ramifications of Trump's tariff policies are far-reaching, affecting not only U.S. households through potential price increases but also impacting global supply chains and international relations. Major economies like Japan and countries in the European Union are closely monitoring developments, with leaders reaching out to the U.S. for negotiations amid fears of being caught in the crossfire of trade hostilities. Looking ahead, the coming days will be critical as the U.S. prepares to implement its new tariffs. Already there are indications that countries like South Korea and Indonesia are eager to negotiate and may offer concessions in exchange for tariff relief. Trump's administration appears to be walking a tightrope, balancing the need for strong trade policies with the realities of a fragile global economy. As global markets react to the evolving landscape, the world watches closely to see whether a diplomatic resolution can be achieved or if the trade war will escalate further. In a dramatic escalation of trade tensions, President Donald Trump has reaffirmed his commitment to imposing sweeping tariffs on a range of countries, particularly targeting China and Vietnam. This move has sent ripples through global markets, causing significant concern among economists, business leaders, and political figures alike. As the ramifications unfold, prominent voices, including tech moguls like Elon Musk, have begun to question the administration's aggressive trade strategy. In a recent address, Trump indicated he is not considering pausing the tariffs despite their negative impact on financial markets. "I don't mind going through it because I see a beautiful picture at the end," he stated, underscoring his belief that these measures are crucial for negotiating better trade terms. The tariffs, which include a universal 10% duty plus additional levies, have already resulted in a notable drop in global stock indices. reminiscent of market downturns not seen since the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. The political landscape is heating up as Trump faces scrutiny from both sides of the aisle. In a Senate Finance Committee hearing, Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, defended the tariffs as necessary for correcting perceived imbalances in trade relationships, particularly with China. He described the tariffs as both a short-term negotiating tool and a long-term punitive measure. However, his testimony was met with skepticism from lawmakers. Senator Ron Wyden expressed concern that the administration lacks a coherent strategy, suggesting that the U.S. economy is in purgatory due to the tariff policies. As the Senate hearing unfolded, Greer faced pointed questions regarding the tangible impacts of the tariffs on American families. Senator Elizabeth Warren called for Congress to reverse the tariffs, arguing that they were harming ordinary citizens. When pressed about the timeline for potential relief from the tariffs, Greer emphasized the administration's focus on long-term negotiations rather than immediate solutions. The international response has been equally intense. China has vowed to fight to the end in response to Trump's threats of additional tariffs, signaling a potential escalation in the ongoing trade war. The Chinese Commerce Ministry has already announced retaliatory measures which have further complicated the global economic landscape. In Hong Kong, leaders have committed to signing more free trade agreements to mitigate the fallout from what they termed the U.S.'s reckless tariff strategy. Business leaders are not holding back their criticisms either. Ken Langone, co-founder of Home Depot, has described the tariffs as excessively high and poorly advised, stating that a more measured approach would have been preferable. 46% on Vietnam? Come on. You might as well tell them don't even bother calling, he remarked, expressing frustration with the rapid implementation of tariffs that he believes stifles constructive negotiation. Elon Musk also chimed in, advocating for a zero-tariff situation between the U.S. and Europe and criticizing Trump's trade advisors for their strategies. Additionally, J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon warned that the tariffs are likely to contribute to inflation and could increase the probability of a recession, underscoring the broader economic risks associated with Trump's trade policies. As global markets attempt to stabilize in the wake of these developments, the political and economic implications of Trump's tariffs remain contentious. The administration's ongoing push for reforms and negotiations may be met with increasing resistance from both domestic and international stakeholders. With China and other countries preparing to retaliate further, the potential for an all-out trade war looms large. Looking ahead, the coming weeks will be critical in determining the trajectory of U.S. trade policy. The administration's ability to navigate these turbulent waters while addressing the growing concerns of American families and businesses will be pivotal in shaping the economic landscape in the months to come. As negotiations continue, all eyes will be on how the Trump administration responds to both criticism and the evolving global trade climate. In a dramatic escalation of trade tensions, President Donald Trump recently announced sweeping tariffs that are set to impact nearly every corner of the global economy. The announcement has sent ripples through financial markets and sparked fierce debate among lawmakers, economists, and business leaders. As the implications of these tariffs begin to unfold, stakeholders are left grappling with uncertainty regarding the future of international trade and its effects on both domestic and global markets. Trump's new tariff regime, which includes a baseline 10% tax on imports from all countries and significantly higher rates for specific nations, has been framed as a necessary measure to level the playing field for American manufacturers. During a press briefing, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated, "We're going to get fair deals and good deals with every country," indicating a belief that negotiations could progress quickly. However, when pressed about the potential for pausing tariffs to facilitate these discussions, Trump was unequivocal: "We're not looking at that." The economic ramifications of these tariffs are already being felt. On the day following the announcement, stock markets experienced a significant sell-off, erasing over $5 trillion in market value in just 2 trading days. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted nearly 8% while the S&P 500 and Nasdaq fell by more than 9% and 10% respectively. Analysts have warned that the tariffs could exacerbate economic instability and potentially lead to a recession. Former International Monetary Fund chief economist Ken Rogoff raised the odds of a recession to 50% following the announcement, a sentiment echoed by J.P. Morgan's chief economist Michael Farrelly, who projected GDP contraction in the coming months. In response to Trump's tariffs, which include a staggering 54% tax on Chinese imports and 20% on goods from the European Union, affected nations are preparing retaliatory measures. China has already announced it will impose a 34% tariff on U.S. imports, while the EU is poised to target up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods, including meat, cereals, and various consumer products. Such reciprocal actions could further escalate tensions and disrupt global supply chains, prompting fears of a full-blown trade war. Moreover, the tariffs have drawn criticism from within Trump's own party. Republican senators have expressed concerns about the lack of exemptions for small businesses that could suffer under the new policy. Senator Ron Johnson voiced disappointment over the exclusionary stance, stating, "I think you ought to consider exclusions for companies potentially going bankrupt by these actions." The lack of a clear strategy from the administration has only deepened worries among lawmakers and business leaders alike. The economic landscape following Trump's tariffs is marked by volatility and apprehension. The White House's messaging has been inconsistent. While officials assure a fast-paced negotiation process, the president's hardline stance raises questions about the feasibility of achieving meaningful agreements. As markets react to the unfolding situation, many are left wondering whether these tariffs will indeed bolster the American economy or if they will lead to further economic difficulties. As the world watches closely, the coming weeks will be crucial in determining the sustainability of Trump's aggressive trade strategy. The administration's approach may yet shift in response to market pressures and international pushback. Ultimately, the outcome of this trade saga will not only shape the future of U.S. economic policy but also redefine global trade dynamics for years to come. In a bold move signaling a significant shift in U.S. military strategy, President Donald Trump has proposed a staggering $1 trillion defense budget for fiscal year 2026. This ambitious plan, announced during a joint press event with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, aims to enhance the United States' military capabilities and asserts Trump's commitment to national security. "This will be the biggest budget we've ever done for the military," Trump declared, emphasizing the historical magnitude of the proposed funding. The new budget marks an almost 12% increase from the current fiscal year's defense spending, a figure that underscores Trump's administration's focus on military expansion and modernization. He cited, "We are getting a very powerful military. We have things under order now," hinting at upcoming advancements that include cutting-edge technology and equipment. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth expressed his support for the initiative on social media, proclaiming, "Coming soon, the first $1 trillion Department of Defense budget." He assured the public that the substantial increase in funding would be utilized judiciously, aimed at enhancing the lethality and readiness of U.S. forces. Hegseth's comments reflect a broader Republican perspective that has long advocated for increased defense spending in response to evolving global threats. While the Trump administration promotes this unprecedented budget increase, it raises questions about the broader fiscal landscape. Congressional Republicans have sought to balance defense enhancements with cuts in other government expenditures to address the federal deficit. However, increasing military spending may complicate these fiscal strategies, especially as Democrats in Congress remain opposed to substantial cuts in non-defense programs. The implications of such a budget are far-reaching, not only for U.S. military readiness but also for international relations. Trump has previously called for NATO allies to increase their defense spending to 5% of their gross domestic product (GDP), a target that the proposed U.S. budget still falls short of achieving in the context of comprehensive alliance commitments. He remarked, "We've never had the kind of aircraft, the kind of missiles, anything that we have ordered," suggesting that the budget aims to prepare the U.S. military for a future where advanced capabilities are essential. Internationally, the proposed budget arrives at a critical moment as the European Union grapples with its own defense independence amid increasing pressure from the US to enhance its military capabilities without becoming overly reliant on American support. As Trump calls for Europe to shoulder a greater share of defense responsibilities, the EU is simultaneously striving to develop a robust defense industrial base to reduce dependency on US military technology. The EU's goal to allocate €800 billion towards defense underscores its commitment to fostering a cohesive and self-sufficient security strategy. As the White House prepares to unveil its full budget proposal later this spring, the ramifications of Trump's $1 trillion defense budget will likely ripple through Congress and beyond, shaping the future of U.S. military strategy and international defense relations. With ongoing geopolitical tensions and an evolving security landscape, the coming months will be pivotal in determining how this ambitious plan manifests and its ultimate impact on global security dynamics. The Panama Canal, a critical artery for global trade, finds itself at the center of a geopolitical tug-of-war that could redefine its operational future. As President José Raúl Mulino navigates a complex relationship with the Trump administration, the stakes have never been higher. The canal's management and security have come under scrutiny, with rising concerns over potential Chinese influence and infrastructure control nearby. However, the response from Washington has often been marked by aggression rather than diplomacy, exacerbating an already precarious situation for Mulino, who is grappling with diminishing political capital at home. In recent months, tensions have escalated as Mulino contends with a series of extreme demands from the Trump administration. U.S. officials have expressed fears that China could interfere with canal operations. But these claims are met with skepticism by Panamanian officials, who emphasize that the Panama Canal Authority operates independently. As Trump publicly criticized Panama's canal management and made calls for a handover, Mulino's ability to address U.S. concerns while maintaining domestic support has become increasingly tenuous. Mulino needs political capital to deliver on U.S. priorities, notes Will Freeman, a fellow for Latin America Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, whether that's reducing Chinese control over strategic infrastructure or advancing critical projects like a new reservoir for the canal. The fiscal realities are daunting. Panama faces a staggering 7.4% fiscal deficit, the largest in its history, alongside rising unemployment and political instability. Mulino's approval ratings have plummeted from 57% to a mere 29% in just a few months, highlighting the urgency of his situation. Mulino's administration has made strides in passing essential reforms, but each step forward is met with the risk of backlash from an increasingly disillusioned populace. The canal's revenues, which account for a significant portion of government financing, are threatened by the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, further complicating Mulino's efforts to stabilize the economy. As one advisor put it, "It's distracting Panama and taking up huge amounts of energy," a sentiment echoed by many within the government who fear that each new U.S. demand could undermine Mulino's authority and position. The precarious balance of power comes into sharper focus when considering the implications of a U.S. takeover of the canal, a scenario that Trump has hinted at but which Mulino has ruled out. An assertion of U.S. control, even under the guise of security, could destabilize regional dynamics and provoke backlash both from within Panama and from international stakeholders. A partially or fully U.S.-controlled canal would not make trade safer. It would amplify risks, warns Freeman, emphasizing that the neutrality historically afforded to the canal is its greatest asset. Despite the challenges, there remain avenues for constructive dialogue. The U.S. has legitimate concerns regarding Chinese influence in the region, particularly regarding cybersecurity and infrastructure investments. Mulino could enhance cooperation by establishing security task forces or engaging in joint military training with U.S. forces. However, with Trump's aggressive rhetoric about taking back the canal, Molino must tread carefully to avoid alienating potential allies in the business community who have vested interests in maintaining relations with China. As the situation unfolds, the role of diplomacy cannot be overstated. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's recent visit to Panama presents an opportunity for a more pragmatic approach that prioritizes collaboration over confrontation. The future of the Panama Canal depends not only on the actions of its current leaders but also on the willingness of external powers to engage in meaningful dialogue rather than coercive demands. In conclusion, the geopolitical landscape surrounding the Panama Canal is fraught with complexity, requiring a delicate balance between national interests and international cooperation. As President Molino seeks to navigate these turbulent waters, the potential for conflict or collaboration looms large, with far-reaching implications for global trade and regional stability. The coming months will be crucial in determining whether diplomacy can prevail over discord in this vital trade corridor.